The US-Israeli illegal war on Iran is about to enter its fifth week. Iran is showing no signs of backing down or rolling over, while the US, the Trump administration, seems to be prepping for a ground invasion.
So Mehdi Hasan just secured incredibly rare access to Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson during active warfare. This is the kind of direct diplomatic confrontation we almost never see. We're witnessing real-time wartime journalism where every question could reshape international relations. This is massive.
But I have to start first with the state of this war right now between the US, Israel on one side, Iran on the other. In your view, is Iran winning this war, losing this war, in a tie? And if you say you're winning, how does Iran define winning, define victory against the US?
Brilliant opening move, forcing them to define victory up front. Most journalists dance around this, but demanding Iran articulate their endgame immediately puts the spokesperson in a strategic bind. Either they reveal too much or sound evasive from minute one.
We hear a lot of experts saying that even if the US were to stop the war tomorrow, stop the bombing, Iran would not stop and has no interest in stopping this war until it establishes or reestablishes deterrence, until it has a guarantee that it won't be attacked again in the future. Is that a fair description of the Iranian government's position?
This cuts right to the heart of security dilemma theory. Iran won't stop until they feel safe from future attacks, but that very position makes them appear more threatening to opponents. It's the same logic that drove nuclear deterrence during the Cold War.
President Trump says he has completely decimated and beaten Iran economically and militarily. He says he has blown Iran off the map, which is obviously not true. It's his typical hyperbole. But the US and Israel have degraded your military severely. They've destroyed huge parts of your infrastructure, set Iran back years, if not decades.
Perfect journalistic balance here, acknowledging Trump's hyperbolic style while still pressing on legitimate military degradation. That separation of rhetoric from reality is exactly what serious war reporting requires. The facts matter regardless of Trump's bombast.
Just hours before we started this interview, Donald Trump posted on his Truth Social website that Iranian negotiators, he called you strange, and he said you are begging for a deal with the US. Is he telling the truth?
The real-time social media element transforms modern diplomacy completely. Trump's Truth Social posts during active negotiations create instant psychological pressure that didn't exist in previous conflicts. Digital warfare happening parallel to physical warfare.
So let me ask you about the nuclear negotiations. You've mentioned it a few times. How close were you? How close was Iran to a nuclear deal, a new nuclear deal with the US in Geneva on the eve of this war? The Omani foreign minister said a deal was, quote, within reach, that there was an agreement on big issues like zero stockpiling and enrichment. But the IAEA chief, Rafael Grossi, has said there was a discussion, yes, but, quote, no agreement at that point. What's the Iranian position on what happened at Geneva on the eve of this war?
Wait, this timing is explosive. If a nuclear deal was genuinely within reach just before war erupted, that suggests someone deliberately chose military action over diplomatic breakthrough. The implications for who wanted this conflict are staggering.
IAEA estimated last year that you had a 400 kilogram stockpile of 60% enriched uranium, which is just a step away, as you know, from 90% weapons grade enrichment, and enough for 10 nuclear warheads, the IAEA said. Your critics often ask, why have 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium? If you weren't planning on building nukes, what other reason would there be to enrich so high to 60%? What do you say to them?
The technical precision here is crucial. 400 kilograms at 60% enrichment versus 90% weapons grade. These aren't abstract numbers. They represent the exact distance between civilian nuclear programs and bomb-making capability. Data-driven journalism at its finest.
And it was a negotiating tactic, a bargaining chip.
That admission is huge. Openly acknowledging uranium stockpiling as diplomatic leverage essentially confirms Iran's nuclear brinksmanship strategy. Most officials would never be that direct about using nuclear materials as bargaining chips.
There has been reporting that Iran and Gulf countries even consider Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, the lead US negotiators, to be, quote, Israeli assets. That's what The Guardian wrote. And that you, Iran, would now prefer to negotiate with Vice President J.D. Vance going forward. Is that the case?
This reveals Iran's sophisticated understanding of American power dynamics. Viewing Witkoff and Kushner as Israeli assets while preferring Vance shows they're analyzing internal U.S. political fault lines, not just treating America as monolithic.
The late Ayatollah Khamenei, your former supreme leader, had a fatwa, a religious ruling, banning nuclear weapons in the early 2000s. Iran agreed in the 2015 JCPOA, the nuclear deal with President Obama, that it would never get nuclear weapons. The US intelligence community confirmed last year that Iran is not seeking nuclear weapons. I wonder, is all of that out of the window now? Is Iran now still willing to say, we will never get nukes? Or has this war changed everything?
This is the ultimate question. Has active warfare fundamentally changed Iran's nuclear calculus? The North Korea comparison is chilling because Kim Jong-un proved nuclear weapons provide absolute security against regime change.
If Iran had nuclear weapons, you wouldn't have been attacked, many say.
Brutally accurate observation. Nuclear deterrence theory suggests Iran wouldn't face current attacks if they possessed weapons. That logic is both strategically sound and terrifyingly dangerous for non-proliferation efforts globally.
You're describing American proposals as maximalist and unreasonable. Some would say yours are also maximalist and unreasonable. Iran has talked about American forces withdrawing from the entire Middle East, which, let's be honest, is not going to happen. There's reporting that Iran now plans to charge fees on ships that go through the Strait of Hormuz once it's reopened. None of that is realistic or reasonable, is it?
Excellent journalistic balance, calling out unrealistic positions from both sides. Iran demanding complete U.S. withdrawal while planning Strait of Hormuz fees is indeed maximalist. Good reporters challenge everyone's fantasy scenarios.
How do we know the new supreme leader of Iran, Mujtaba Khamenei, is even alive or in good health? We've not seen him in public since he was appointed. No videos, no audio.
Intelligence gold. Questioning the new supreme leader's visibility during wartime reveals potential internal instability. If Mujtaba Khamenei can't appear publicly, that suggests either health issues or security fears that could destabilize everything.
You had massive protests in Iran back in January, demanding a change of government, and for many, an end to the Islamic Republic's theocratic model of government in particular. Why does your government refuse to listen to the demands of the people? Why replace one unelected supreme leader who ruled for 40 years, nearly 40 years, with another unelected supreme leader who the Iranian people didn't choose, had no say over? How is your country not a dictatorship?
Direct confrontation of authoritarianism that needed to happen. Pressing on unelected leadership succession during mass protests exposes the fundamental legitimacy crisis. Most journalists avoid this stark dictatorship framing.
Some people say 30 to 40,000 people were killed. That's seen as the higher end. Others say 3 to 4,000. I think your own government has admitted that thousands died. How many people were killed in these protests in January, according to you?
The persistence on death toll accountability is vital journalism. When governments claim hundreds, but credible estimates suggest thousands, that numerical gap represents real human lives that deserve acknowledgement, not bureaucratic minimization.
When leading human rights groups like Amnesty International accuse your government of, quote, massacring protesters, when they say they have reviewed, and I'm quoting here, verified videos and eyewitness accounts of, quote, security forces positioned on the streets and on the rooftops of buildings, including houses, mosques, and police stations, repeatedly firing, quote, rifles and shotguns loaded with metal pellets at protesters, frequently targeting their heads and torsos. When Amnesty, no friend of the US or Israeli governments, when Amnesty says that, Dr. Bagai, why should we believe your government and not Amnesty?
Devastating use of Amnesty's documented evidence, verified videos, eyewitness accounts, medical testimony. Citing Amnesty's independence from US and Israeli interests makes the human rights violations impossible to dismiss as Western propaganda.
Sound, I'm sorry to say, like an Israeli official denying what happened in Gaza. No, these are eyewitness accounts, doctors' accounts, videos.
You compare Iran's peaceful protest to Gaza? Come on.
No, I'm comparing your response, denying a...
Brilliant comparison, showing how authoritarian denial tactics are identical, whether it's Iran deflecting protest killings or Israel deflecting Gaza casualties. The rhetorical patterns of power protecting itself are remarkably consistent.
But Iran is also using cluster munitions against against Israel, which are indiscriminate. They cause a lot of civilian casualties. And again, Amnesty International, human rights group, has previously called the use of such munitions a flagrant violation of international humanitarian law. Dr. Baghai, how can you condemn the US and Israel for breaking international law if you're doing it too?
This balanced accountability is essential, holding Iran to the same international law standards they invoke against opponents. Cluster munitions are war crimes, regardless of who deploys them. Moral consistency in wartime coverage.
There's chatter here in DC that we could see a ground invasion of Iran, whether it's Karg Island, whether it's Iran proper, the mainland, as early as this weekend, maybe. We know Donald Trump likes to do things at weekends. Are you prepared for that? What will the Iranian response be to a ground invasion by the most powerful armed forces in the history of the world?
The urgency here is palpable. Ground invasion speculation with weekend timing creates immediate stakes. Trump's history of weekend military actions makes this time frame genuinely plausible, not just journalistic speculation.
What is your message to Donald Trump today?
This represents journalism at its finest, securing rare wartime access, asking devastating questions with technical precision, and holding both sides accountable. Access like this during active conflict is extraordinarily difficult to achieve.